For today's tutorial, I thought I'd take a theme that I have done many different times with dozens of different tutorials, but make the easiest, quickest, and the most lightweight version of all of them. The first thing I'm going to be using is packaging peanuts, and you've probably seen these in any parcels. They squash down easily, and they also stick to each other very easily if you add a bit of water. But what we're going to be doing today instead is starting to squish the ends. So you want to take one of the packaging peanuts, squish the end, twist it if you want so that you get a little bit of a nice curve to it, and try and get the end really nice and thin. Once that's done, and you've done that with two of them, you're then going to go ahead and take a pair of scissors and cut an angle into the horns. Now if you want them just to come straight out of your forehead, you can ignore this step completely, but I want them to be a bit angled. To colour these in, I'm going to be using powders. You could use some liquids if you wanted to use something like a watercolour or an acrylic, but one thing to bear in mind with packaging peanuts is if they get wet they have a tendency to shrink, which is great if that's the effect you're looking for, but it's a little bit annoying if you've got a certain size in mind and then they shrink once you've painted them. So you can either use something like pan pastels or you can use regular eyeshadow, it will do exactly the same thing. Once you've painted them, you then really want to set it, unless you don't mind getting a little bit of that powder which you've used all over your forehead. Now that can look good, but if you want something a little bit cleaner, then you can go ahead and hairspray them. But like I mentioned, if they get too wet, they shrink and they have a tendency to curl up. So if you do this, try and hold the hairspray as far away as you can without completely soaking it. Once you've done that, you just need to put it on the side, wait for it to dry so that the smell of hairspray isn't quite so overwhelming, and now we're going to go ahead and stick them down. To stick the horns down, you could use something like a prosthetic adhesive, latex, but I'm going to be using eyelash glue since I'm already showing you how to make a very cheap and effective Halloween costume. I might as well try and stick to very affordable products. So I'm going to be using lash glue. This is going to make the base shrink a tiny bit, not as much as if you used water, but it is going to shrink a bit. I'm going to stick down the horns. And the good thing about this is that they're very, very movable. They will move with your face, so they're not heavy and they're very comfortable to wear. Now you could use a lash glue to go around the base just to cover the edges, but I'm not going to do that just because I prefer to use something like scar wax. You want to take the scar wax and you're going to roll it into a ring which is going to go around the base of the horns. Now to blend out the edges, what I'm going to be using is an art palette knife. You could use something like your fingers, or you could use any kind of sculpting tool, but I don't like using sculpting tools which don't have a little bit of give in them, especially with scar wax, because having that flexible end means that you can get a very smooth edge. You could of course use your fingers, but as you can see here, once the scar wax gets a little too warm, it has a tendency to stick to your fingers, which is why I prefer to use tools like the one I showed you previously. I've put a little bit of powder to get rid of that shininess around the horns, and now I'm just going to be using a regular lipstick. Yes, it is a very bright and obnoxious colour, but it's Halloween. I think I can get away with it. I'm going to be using a lipstick brush, and you want to try and get that right in between the horns and the edge of the scar wax. Once that's done, just take a regular black eyeshadow and you want to dabble that around the edges to make it look as if it's burnt its way through your forehead. Now of course you could go ahead and do something a little bit more exciting with your makeup, or you could leave it like that, and that's it. You're done.